UPS plane crash.
UPS plane crash.
The UPS plane crash.
UPS plane crash in Kentucky. The death toll has now climbed to at least 12 as officials search for answers.
It started as a routine flight out of Kentucky on that ordinary evening. Nobody noticed anything unusual. But as the flight crossed almost the height of a 15-storied building, cockpit alarms screamed, the radar went dark, and the plane suddenly vanished. It came as a shock how a routine situation could go out of hand in just 60 seconds. Rescue teams raced toward the fire, lighting up the runway, but no one knew what they were walking into. And here's the twist. This wasn't a passenger flight, but a cargo one. It was carrying something that made the crash even deadlier. This is the devastating story of UPS Airlines Flight 2976, something that could change how the cargo flights work in the United States. November 4th, 2025. An ordinary Tuesday at Louisville International Airport. Workers punched in for their shifts, trucks rolled through the UPS Worldport facility. And sitting on the tarmac waiting for its routine flight to Hawaii was a McDonnell Douglas MD-11F cargo jet. Inside, 3 crew members prepared for a 4,300-mile journey across the continent and over the Pacific Ocean. But they had no idea that in a few minutes they were about to become part of aviation history. The aircraft wasn't just any cargo plane, and it had been flying for 34 years. Built back in 1991, it first served Thai Airways International as a passenger jet, carrying hundreds of people across Asia. But just like people, planes also change careers. In 2006, UPS Airlines bought this one, stripped out the seats, and converted it into a freight plane. And for nearly 2 decades after that, it carried packages instead of passengers, logging thousands of hours and countless miles. On its journey, it had survived thunderstorms, turbulence, storms, and everything else the nature could throw at it. But on this particular Tuesday evening, something was different. Something was terribly, catastrophically wrong. At approximately 5:13 in the afternoon, local time, UPS Flight 2976 began rolling down runway 17 right. The engines roared. The ground speed increased gradually, 100 knots, 150 knots. And then the nose lifted, the plane started climbing to the sky. But at that moment, everyone saw something that made their blood run cold. The engine number 1 on the left wing suddenly caught fire. And it was not a small one. The entire engine was burning like a torch as the plane was flying into the evening sky. And this was just the beginning of a disaster that would shake Louisville to its core. When an aircraft engine catches fire during takeoff, pilots face the most critical decision of their lives. Should they abort, or should they continue? Every second counts, and the wrong choice only means death. Flight 2976's crew had maybe 5 seconds to make that call. But here's what makes this situation even more horrifying. The fire didn't just stay contained to the engine. That burning engine created a trail of destruction behind it. Video footage captured by witnesses shows flames streaming from the left side of the aircraft even before the wheels left the ground. This means the plane was already dying internally just before it took off, but no one noticed it. How was this possible? We got to know what happened next from the flight tracking data, and the numbers are chilling. The aircraft reached a maximum altitude of just 175 feet above ground level, which is barely taller than a 15-story building. Compare that to any commercial airliners that typically climb to over 35,000 feet. The highest recorded ground speed of this plane was 186 knots, which is similar to 214 miles per hour. That's fast enough to generate a decent lift and get airborne, but not fast enough to save anyone on board. What this means is, the aircraft was climbing, sure, but it was climbing with an already dead engine trailing fire and smoke. The asymmetric thrust, the loss of power on one side, and the aerodynamic chaos created by a burning turbine. All of it combined into a perfect storm of catastrophic failure. As a result, seconds after becoming airborne, the flight made a sharp descent to the left. Not a gentle bank, not a controlled turn, a sharp, violent drop toward the earth. The burning left engine had separated from the wing during the takeoff roll. Photographers later captured images of it lying in the grass near runway 17 right. Without that engine, without thrust on the left side, the aircraft was uncontrollable. Naturally, it rolled on one side, flipping through the air like a toy thrown by an angry child. And then it hit the roof of the UPS supply chain warehouse with a violent force. Its landing gear was still extended, and the right wing was still facing skyward. But when a fully fueled cargo jet crashes into an industrial area, you don't just get a plane crash. You get an inferno that threatens an entire neighborhood. Flight 2976 was carrying 38,000 gallons of jet fuel. That's 144,000 liters of highly flammable liquid, a classic setup for an insanely wild explosion, enough to burn for hours. And this burning wreckage didn't land in an empty field or a lake or an unpopulated zone. It plowed directly through a semi-truck parking area and slammed into multiple buildings where people were working. And what happened next was simply inexplicable. The crash site was a nightmare scenario for first responders. At least 2 businesses took direct hits. Kentucky Petroleum Recycling, a facility that processes used oil and fuel products, was struck pretty directly. Just imagine the horror: a petroleum recycling plant, filled with flammable materials, hit by a burning aircraft carrying 38,000 gallons of jet fuel. The second business, Grade A Auto Parts, which was an auto scrapyard, was also impacted. As a result, a lot of people trapped inside buildings. Multiple structures caught fire, and the flames spread fast, fed by jet fuel and whatever combustible materials were stored at these facilities. Simply put, the scene looked like a piece of hell unleashed on Earth. The smoke plume could be seen for miles, and 2 employees from the auto yard were immediately unaccounted for. Nobody knew how many customers had been on the premises when the plane hit. The 3 crew members on the aircraft were presumed dead. And as the fire raged and emergency services rushed to the scene, one terrible fact became clear. This wasn't just a plane crash, this was a mass casualty event. The deadliest crash in UPS Airlines' history had just unfolded in real time, and the final body count was still unknown. Even the air traffic control couldn't help them. Normally, when something goes wrong, pilots can communicate with the tower. They can declare an emergency and can get guidance, warnings, or assistance. But on Flight 2976, there was only silence. What made the matter even worse for them was the radio communications with air traffic control, which are routinely archived for exactly these kinds of investigations, were so full of interference that no meaningful speech could be discerned. Think about it. The crew may have been screaming for help. They may have been trying to explain what was happening and requesting an emergency landing, but nobody could hear them. The interference was so bad that whatever they said was lost in static and noise. Even worse, this communication failure adds another layer of tragedy to an already horrific event. Without clear radio contact, air traffic controllers couldn't warn other aircraft. They couldn't clear emergency equipment onto the runway. They couldn't do anything except watch as the situation spiraled out of control. And for investigators, this creates a massive problem. Cockpit voice recordings and ATC communications are critical pieces of evidence. They tell us what the pilots knew, when they knew it, and what decisions they made. But if the radio was jammed with interference, that entire source of information might be useless. The investigation would have to rely on flight data recorders only, alongside witness testimony and physical evidence from the wreckage. But as the aircraft impacted the ground, the Louisville Metro Police Department immediately issued a stay-in-place order. Not a suggestion, an order. Anyone within 5 miles of the airport had to remain indoors. They can't leave their homes, can't go outside, can't breathe the potentially toxic air. The order was later reduced to 1 mile, then eventually to just a quarter mile as the fire was brought under control. But for hours, a major American city was essentially locked down because of a cargo plane that barely made it off the runway. Mayor Craig Greenberg held a press conference that no elected official ever wants to give. At least 12 people have been killed. The plane's 3 crew members were likely among the fatalities. 15 others were injured, and here's the number that should make your stomach drop. Over 16 families reported missing relatives. Their families calling hospitals, calling police, calling anyone who might know where their loved ones were. And we are kind of sure that more bodies were going to be found. the University of Louisville health system reported receiving 15 patients from the crash site. By the next morning, 13 had been discharged. That sounds like good news until you realize what it means, and 2 patients were still hospitalized. And those were just the survivors, the people who made it out. But what about the ones who didn't? What about the workers at Kentucky Petroleum Recycling who were there when a burning aircraft hit their building? The Louisville Metro Police made one thing absolutely clear. Do not go to hospitals looking for loved ones. Do not swamp the emergency rooms, and do not interfere with medical personnel trying to save lives. Instead, a reunification center was set up at the police training academy. Families could go there, provide information about missing relatives, and wait for news. More than 100 firefighters were on scene. The fire was nearly completely contained by 10:30 that night, freeing up first responders to search for victims. But as searchers moved through the wreckage, everyone knew what they were looking for wasn't survivors. They were looking for bodies. In the meantime, the National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, launched a GO team of 28 personnel to investigate the crash. The Federal Aviation Administration joined the investigation. UPS Airlines announced they were in close contact and cooperation with both agencies. Everyone wanted answers. But aviation investigations don't work like television shows. There's no dramatic music, no instant revelations, no solving the mystery in 42 minutes. These investigations take months, sometimes years. They require sifting through wreckage, analyzing data, interviewing witnesses, and reconstructing exactly what happened, second by second. The preliminary investigation had some facts to work with. The left engine caught fire. That's confirmed by multiple videos and photographs. The engine separated from the wing during the takeoff roll, which is also confirmed by images of the engine lying near the runway. The aircraft reached 175 feet before descending sharply to the left. But none of these are yet connected to the major questions like, why did the engine catch fire? Was it a mechanical failure? Was it a maintenance issue? Was it a design flaw? Had the engine been inspected recently? Were there warning signs that were missed? Because the aircraft was 34 years old. In aviation terms, that's not ancient, but it's not young either. How many flight hours had it logged, and how many takeoffs and landings had stressed its structure? How many maintenance checks had it undergone? These questions would all need answers, but one thing was already clear. Something catastrophic happened to that left engine, and it happened at the worst possible moment. Like during takeoff, when the plane was heavy with fuel, when the crew had no margin for error, when abort meant sliding off the runway at high speed, and continue meant flying with one engine on fire. But we can't just deny the fact that this particular flight has a complicated history in aviation. It was designed in the late 80s as a modernized version of the legendary DC-10. It featured improved engines, better aerodynamics, and advanced avionics for its time. But it never achieved the commercial success McDonnell Douglas hoped for. Only 186 were built before production ended in 2000. By comparison, Boeing built over 1,500 777s. Many airlines found this flight model, MD-11, difficult to fly, particularly during landings. Its flight control systems required careful management. It was less forgiving than newer designs. As passenger airlines retired their MD-11's models, many were converted to cargo haulers. UPS operates a significant fleet of them. FedEx flies them too. Why? These aircraft are workhorses capable of carrying enormous loads over long distances. But they're also aging. Maintenance becomes more critical. Inspections become more frequent. The risk of mechanical failure increases. So naturally, this question keeps coming that, does that mean Flight 2976's age became a factor? But age alone doesn't cause engines to catch fire. Something specific went wrong. A component failed. Maybe a fuel line ruptured. Maybe foreign object debris got sucked into the intake. Maybe maintenance personnel missed something during an inspection. The investigation would chase down every possibility, every theory, every potential explanation. Because 12 people are already dead and their families deserve to know why. Besides that, we are also talking about a massive financial loss too. Because right after this crash, all flights to and from the airport were immediately canceled. UPS suspended operations at its massive Worldport air hub. This wasn't just any facility. UPS Worldport is one of the busiest cargo hubs in the world. Packages from across America flow through Louisville every single day. Shutting it down meant disrupting the entire logistics network. All public schools in Jefferson County were closed the day after the crash. Not because of damage to the schools themselves, but because the community needed time to process what had happened. Because students might have lost parents, because teachers might have lost family members, because an entire city was in shock. The investigation continues to find out what really happened in those grim final moments of Flight 2976 that played out in just less than 60 seconds. The NTSB team is still gathering evidence, still interviewing witnesses, still analyzing data. Preliminary findings might be released in weeks, but the full report might take a year or more. What caused the engine fire? Could it have been prevented? Should the crew have aborted the takeoff? Were there system failures beyond the engine? Why was radio communication filled with interference? Every answer will lead to more questions. That's the nature of aviation accidents. They're rarely caused by a single factor. They're usually the result of multiple failures, each one building on the previous, until the chain of causation becomes unbreakable and disaster becomes inevitable. UPS Flight 2976 is now part of that grim history. What do you think went wrong with it? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel to get more updates on this crash.